Flight 447 from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles was running 30 minutes late, and the passengers were already irritable before boarding even began. The gate area at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport buzzed with the usual mixture of business travelers checking laptops, families wrangling children, and everyone collectively sighing at yet another delay. Among the crowd stood Captain Rebecca Viper Chen, 34 years old, though she could easily pass for younger. She wore simple jeans, a plain navy blue sweater, and comfortable sneakers. Her black hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, except for a simple watch. She carried only a small backpack, traveling light, as always, to everyone around her. She looked like any other young professional heading to the West Coast, maybe a tech worker, maybe a graduate student. Certainly not someone noteworthy, but Rebecca Chen was far from ordinary. She was one of the most highly decorated fighter pilots in the United States Air Force. Her call sign, Viper, had been earned through 12 years of exceptional service, including combat missions in 3 different theaters of operation. She'd flown F-2 to Raptors, trained new pilots at Top Gun, and most recently had been handpicked for a classified program that only a handful of people in the military even knew existed. 3 days ago, she'd been flying escort missions for high-value assets. Yesterday, she'd been in meetings at the Pentagon. Today, she just wanted to get home to Los Angeles to see her aging father, who'd recently been diagnosed with cancer. She'd taken a week of leave, her first real break in 18 months. When boarding began, Rebecca found herself in Group 4, economy class. She'd booked the ticket herself, using her own money, not military travel. This was personal time, and she preferred keeping a low profile anyway. The attention that came with wearing her uniform or mentioning her rank always made her uncomfortable. Seat 2 to C, middle seat. The worst seat on any plane. She settled in, tucking her small backpack under the seat in front of her. To her left, in 22B, sat a woman in her 60s wearing too much perfume, already asleep before takeoff with a neck pillow and eye mask. To her right, in 22D, was still empty. Rebecca pulled out a paperback novella thriller she'd been trying to finish for months and tried to tune out the chaos of boarding, passengers squeezing down the narrow aisle, jamming oversized bags into overhead bins, and arguing over seat assignments. "Excuse me? That's my seat." Rebecca looked up to see a man in his late 30s, expensive suit, designer carry-on bag, and the unmistakable air of someone who believed the world revolved around him. His name was Brandon Mitchell, no relation, and he was a senior vice president at a venture capital firm, a fact he mentioned to anyone within earshot. 2D, Rebecca confirmed, standing to let him pass. "Unfortunately," Brandon said with obvious distaste, eyeing the middle seat passenger Rebecca's, he squeezed past. "I specifically requested an aisle seat in business class. But apparently, the airline thinks a last-minute downgrade is acceptable customer service." Rebecca said nothing. Returning to her book, Brandon settled into his seat with excessive sighing and adjustment. Making sure everyone knew he was suffering, he pulled out his laptop, an expensive model that he positioned at an angle to ensure maximum screen visibility to anyone who might glance over. As the plane continued boarding, the woman in front of them, seat to 1D, turned around. She was mid-40s, highlighted hair, wearing athleisure wear that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Can you believe this delay?" she said to Brandon, clearly viewing him as a fellow member of the frequent flying elite. "I have a very important meeting in LA. This is completely unacceptable." "Tell me about it," Brandon commiserated. "I fly business class specifically to avoid these kinds of problems, but here I am, stuck in economy, with ... He gestured vaguely at Rebecca without looking at her directly. ... Regular passengers. The woman glanced at Rebecca, taking in her casual clothes and lack of obvious status markers. "I know exactly what you mean. Some people just don't understand the urgency of important business." Rebecca kept reading, used to being invisible to people like this. It didn't bother her. In fact, she preferred it. But Brandon wasn't done. "I mean, look at this." He gestured at the cramped economy cabin. "This is barely better than flying Spirit, and the people they let in economy these days." He shook his head meaningfully. A man across the aisle seat to 2F leaned over. He was younger, maybe late 20s, wearing a polo shirt with his startup company's logo. "Dude, tell me about it. I had to sit next to someone's screaming baby on my last flight. Like, can't they have a separate section for people with kids?" "Exactly." The woman in 21D chimed in. "Or at least make them pay extra for disturbing other passengers." Rebecca turned a page in her book, though she'd stopped actually reading. This was going to be a long flight. The plane finally pushed back from the gate, 45 minutes late. The flight attendants went through their safety demonstration while most passengers ignored them. Too absorbed in phones, laptops, and conversations about how important and busy they all were. As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, Brandon made a phone call, speaking loudly enough to ensure everyone within 3 rows could hear. "Yeah. I'm on the plane now. No, they downgraded me, can you believe it? I'm in economy, ... I know, it's ridiculous. Listen, when I land, I need you to draft a complaint letter to the airline. Include my status as a platinum member, and mention that I've flown over 200,000 miles with them. Yeah, I want compensation, obviously." Rebecca felt the woman next to the window shift in her sleep, disturbed by the noise. She caught the eye of a flight attendant, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and visible fatigue. "Excuse me, sir," the flight attendant said politely to Brandon. "We're about to take off. You'll need to end your call and turn your phone to airplane mode." Brandon held up one finger in a wait gesture, continuing his conversation. ... And make sure you see their executive customer service team." "Sir," the flight attendant repeated, firmer now. "Federal regulations require all phones to be—" "I heard you," Brandon snapped, finally looking at her. "I'll be done in a second." He finished his call with deliberate slowness, making it clear he was choosing to comply rather than being forced. As the flight attendant moved away, he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Unbelievable. Like 30 seconds would make a difference." The woman in 21D turned around again. "They're so strict about every little rule. Meanwhile, look at this cabin half, these people probably can't even afford to be here. I saw someone with a Spirit Airlines bag." Rebecca glanced up from her book. "Is there something wrong with Spirit Airlines?" The woman looked at her for the first time, really looked, taking in Rebecca's casual appearance and apparently unimpressed demeanor. "Well, it's not exactly premium travel, is it? It gets people where they need to go," Rebecca said mildly, returning to her book. Brandon scoffed. "Spoken like someone who's never flown business class. Maybe she's never worked hard enough to afford it," the startup guy across the aisle added with a smirk. Rebecca felt a familiar twinge of annoyance, but kept her expression neutral. She'd learned long ago that engaging with people like this was pointless. Let them have their assumptions. She knew who she was. The plane accelerated down the runway and lifted into the air. The familiar sensation of takeoff that Rebecca had experienced thousands of times, though usually from a very different type of aircraft. Once the seatbelt sign turned off, the cabin settled into the familiar rhythm of a cross-country flight. Flight attendants began preparing the beverage service. Passengers reclined seats, pulled out laptops, and settled in for the 5-hour journey. Brandon immediately pulled down his tray table and opened his laptop, angling it so the screen was visible to Rebecca. He was working on what appeared to be a presentation about disruptive innovation in fintech, slides full of buzzwords and graphs with arrows pointing upward. "Excuse me," he said to the passing flight attendant. "I'll have a gin and tonic. Tanqueray, if you have it. If not, Bombay Sapphire will do." "We have both, sir." "Excellent. Make it a double. And I'll need extra lime." The woman in 21D ordered white wine. "Your best Chardonnay, please, not the cheap stuff," while the startup guy got craft beer. "Do you have any IPAs? Specifically, West Coast style." When the flight attendant reached Rebecca, she smiled. "Just water, please." "Thank you. That's it?" Brandon said, not bothering to hide his amusement. Just water? I'm not thirsty for anything else. Of course not, he said, with a knowing look at the woman in 21D, water's free. The woman smirked. Some people have to watch their budget. Rebecca felt the urge to mention that she'd recently turned down a six-figure private sector job offer to continue her military service. But she stayed quiet. These people weren't worth the energy. As the flight continued, Brandon's phone buzzed repeatedly. Each time, he'd glance at it and make exaggerated sighs about how busy and in demand he was. My associate in Tokyo, he explained to no one in particular. We're closing a $40 million deal. The pressure never stops when you're operating at this level. I completely understand, the woman in 21D said. I'm in real estate development. High-end properties. We just broke ground on a luxury condo project in Beverly Hills. $20 million units. The startup guy jumped in. Yeah, my company just closed our Series A funding round. $8 million. We're disrupting the meal kit delivery space with our AI-powered nutrition optimization. They continued like this for nearly an hour, a constant competition of who was more successful, more important, more busy. Rebecca tuned them out. Finishing her novel and starting a crossword puzzle from the in-flight magazine. About 2 hours into the flight, Brandon stood to use the restroom. When he returned, he noticed Rebecca's crossword puzzle. Doing puzzles, he said with barely concealed condescension. That's cute. It passes the time, Rebecca said simply. I suppose when you don't have urgent work to do, you can afford to play games. He gestured at his laptop, where his presentations still glowed impressively. Some of us don't have that luxury. The woman in 21D craned around again. What do you do for work, dear? The question was asked in that particular tone that suggested she was already certain. The answer would be unimpressive. Rebecca considered her response. She could say she was in the Air Force. She could mention she was a pilot. She could even explain that she held one of the highest security clearances possible and had flown missions that would remain classified for decades. Instead, she said, I work for the government. The three of them exchanged looks, the universal expression of people who'd just confirmed their assumptions about someone being beneath them. Government work, Brandon said, nodding slowly. That's stable, I suppose. Good benefits, I hear. Pension and all that must be nice, the startup guy added, not having to worry about performance or competition. Just show up, collect a paycheck. Government jobs are basically welfare for college graduates who can't make it in the real world. The woman said, Mataveth. As if this were simply common knowledge, Rebecca felt her jaw tighten but kept her voice level. It's meaningful work. I'm sure you find it fulfilling, Brandon said in a tone that made clear he found nothing fulfilling about it at all. Everyone needs to find their own level, right? Not everyone can handle hypershare private sector careers. A man in the row behind them leaned forward. He'd been listening to the conversation and clearly felt compelled to contribute. My tax dollars paying for your salary, hope you're working hard for us taxpayers. Several nearby passengers chuckled. Rebecca took a slow breath, reminding herself that these people knew nothing about her life, her work, or her sacrifices. She'd flown combat missions where she'd dodged surface-to-air missiles. She'd made split-second decisions that saved lives. She'd pushed aircraft to their absolute limits and brought them home safely. She'd earned the respect of every pilot she'd ever flown with. But to these people, she was just a generic government worker in economy class, not worth their time or respect. I do my best, she said quietly. Returning to her crossword, Brandon turned to the woman in 21D, clearly done slumming with the economy passengers. So tell me about this Beverly Hills project. What's the square footage on these units? As they launched into another round of one-upmanship, Rebecca noticed the kind-eyed flight attendant watching from the galley. The woman caught Rebecca's eye and gave a small, sympathetic smile, the look of someone who'd witnessed countless variations of this same scene and knew exactly what was happening. Rebecca smiled back slightly, a silent acknowledgement of solidarity. The plane continued west, crossing from East Coast to Midwest. The landscape below, transitioning from dense urban sprawl to geometric farmland. Inside the cabin, The atmosphere had settled into familiar patterns, some passengers sleeping, others working, a few watching movies on seatback screens. Brandon had finally stopped talking long enough to focus on his laptop, though he continued to position it for maximum visibility. The woman in 21D had fallen asleep with her wine glass balanced precariously on her tray table. The startup guy was on his fourth beer and had started explaining his business model to an elderly man across the aisle, who clearly wanted to read his newspaper in peace. Rebecca had moved from the crossword puzzle to simply looking out the window past the sleeping woman in 2B. Somewhere down there was Middle America's small towns, highways, rivers winding through valleys. She'd flown over this terrain countless times, though usually at much higher altitudes and much faster speeds. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, expecting an update from her father, or maybe one of her squadron mates. Instead, it was from a number she recognized immediately, even though it rarely contacted her directly. The message was simple. Viper, are you on flight 447? Rebecca felt a small jolt of adrenaline. That number belonged to her direct superior at the Pentagon, someone who only contacted her when something important was happening. She typed back, "Yes, sir. Is there a problem?" The response came quickly. "No problem. Check your secure email when you land. And Viper, you might want to look out your window in about 20 minutes." Rebecca stared at the message, confused. Look out the window. What was that supposed to mean? She was about to type a follow-up question when another message came through. Just watch. You'll understand. Blue skies. Captain Blue Skies was Air Force informal code for good luck or safe flying. But why would her superior be wishing her good luck on a commercial flight? Rebecca pocketed her phone, now curious and slightly on edge. In her line of work, mysterious messages usually meant something was about to happen, though what could possibly happen on a routine commercial flight from DC to LA? She waited, checking her watch periodically. 15 minutes passed. Then 18. At the 20-minute mark, she found herself staring out the window with increasing intensity, scanning the sky, and then she saw it. At first, it was just a glint in the distant sunlight reflecting off metal at high altitude. Rebecca's trained eye caught it immediately, recognizing the distinctive shape even before her brain fully processed what she was seeing. 2 F-22 Raptor fighter jets, flying in formation approximately 2 miles off the right side of the commercial aircraft. Rebecca's heart rate increased. F-22s didn't just randomly fly near commercial aircraft. This was deliberate. This was coordinated. But why? The fighter jets maintained their distance, keeping perfect formation with the passenger plane. To most passengers, they would be nearly invisible, just distant specks in the sky, if noticed at all. But Rebecca saw them clearly. More than that, she recognized the flying style, the precise formation spacing. These were Top Gun graduates, pilots trained to the highest level. Just like her, the woman in 2 to be stirred in her sleep, shifting position. Through the gap, Rebecca had a clearer view now. The F-22s were gradually moving closer, tightening their formation with the commercial jet. And then, from the left side of the aircraft, 2 more shapes appeared. F-35 Lightning II fighters, the newest generation of stealth aircraft. 4 fighter jets now flanked Flight 447, 2 on each side. Maintaining perfect formation, Rebecca's military mind immediately understood the precision required for this maneuver. Coordinating for fighter jets to fly in formation with a commercial aircraft required extensive planning, clearance from multiple air traffic control centers, and approval from the highest levels of command. This wasn't random. This was intentional. And it was for her. But why would they send 4 of the most advanced fighter jets in the American arsenal to escort a commercial flight carrying 1 off-duty pilot? As if in answer, her phone buzzed again. Another message from the Pentagon number. Look up, Viper. Rebecca's eyes went to the overhead compartment, confused. And then she heard the distinctive high-altitude roar of massive engines. Different from the commercial jets, steady hum. Through the window, descending from above, came an aircraft so iconic that even non-aviation enthusiasts would recognize it instantly. Air Force One. The modified Boeing 747 was unmistakable, the distinctive blue and white livery. The American flag on the tail, United States of America, emblazoned along the fuselage in bold letters. It was descending from its higher cruising altitude to match speed with Flight 447, taking position approximately half a mile ahead of the commercial jet. Rebecca's mind raced. Air Force One didn't deviate from its flight path without extraordinary reason. The president's plane maintained strict schedules and security protocols. For it to deliberately position itself near a commercial aircraft meant someone with serious authority had made serious decisions. The 4 fighter jets adjusted their formation, creating a diamond pattern around both aircraft, Air Force One leading, Flight 447 following. With the fighters providing escort to both planes, they were flying in presidential formation. Other passengers were starting to notice now. A child several rows up pointed out the window. "Mummy, look at those planes." A teenager across the aisle had her phone out, recording. "Oh my God, are those fighter jets?" Within seconds, the cabin erupted in excited chatter. Passengers on the right side of the aircraft crowded to the windows, phones out, taking photos and videos. Those on the left side unbuckled and leaned across to see. "What's happening?" Someone asked. "Are we in danger? Is that Air Force One? Why are there military jets?" Brandon finally looked up from his laptop, annoyed by the commotion. "What's everyone?" He stopped mid-sentence, staring out the window at the fighter jet flying in perfect formation just a few hundred yards away. "What the hell?" The woman in 21D woke with a start. "What's going on? Why is everyone?" She saw the jets, and her eyes went wide. "Oh my God." The pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm and professional, despite what had to be an extraordinary situation for a commercial aviator. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez from the flight deck. I'm sure many of you have noticed we have some company out there today. I can confirm that we are being escorted by military aircraft as part of a special honor ceremony. There is no danger whatsoever. This is actually quite an honor for everyone aboard. We ask that you please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened and enjoy this once-in-a-lifetime view. Our flight attendants will be coming through the cabin shortly with more information." An honor ceremony. Rebecca was more confused than ever. What kind of honor ceremony required Air Force One and for fighter jets? The kind-eyed flight attendant made her way down the aisle, stopping at each row to answer excited questions. When she reached row 22, she leaned down and spoke quietly to Rebecca. "Ma'am, I've been asked to inform you that you have a call waiting in the cockpit. If you'd follow me, please." Brandon overheard this. "A call in the cockpit? What does that mean?" "I'm sorry, sir. I can only speak with this passenger." Rebecca unbuckled and stood, slipping past Brandon's knees into the aisle. Every passenger in the nearby rows watched her, curious about who this apparently unremarkable woman in economy class could be. "Who is she?" Someone whispered. "Why does she get to go to the cockpit? Maybe she knows someone important." Rebecca followed the flight attendant forward, past curious stares and whispered speculation. At the cockpit door, the flight attendant knocked in a specific pattern. The door opened, and the co-pilot gestured Rebecca inside. The flight deck was cramped with instruments and controls. 2 pilots in the seats, and barely enough room for one additional person. Captain Rodriguez, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, turned to look at Rebecca. "Captain Chen, I presume?" "Yes, sir." He gestured to the radio headset hanging on a hook. "You have a call on secure channel." "They're waiting." Rebecca put on the headset, her heart pounding now. "This is Captain Chen." "Viper, good to hear your voice." The voice on the other end was instantly recognizable. General Patricia Maurice, commander of Air Combat Command and one of the highest-ranking women in the Air Force. "I hope we didn't startle you with our little formation flight, ma'am. With all due respect, what is happening?" The general laughed. "What's happening, Captain? Is that you're being honored? Are you looking at Air Force One out there?" Rebecca glanced through the cockpit windows at the massive aircraft flying ahead of them. "Yes, ma'am. The president is aboard, returning from a NATO summit." When I mentioned to the National Security Advisor that one of our most decorated pilots was flying commercial today, and that Air Force One's flight path happened to cross near your route, well, let's just say some phone calls were made. Rebecca felt dizzy. Ma'am, I don't understand. Captain Chen, 3 weeks ago you completed a mission that saved 6 American lives in a situation where most pilots would have called it impossible. You flew a damaged F-22 through a sandstorm, at night, with minimal instruments, and brought everyone home. That mission is classified, but the people who need to know about it know, and they wanted to show their appreciation. The Honor Escort, ma'am. The Honor Escort. You're flying under presidential protection right now, Captain. Those 4 jets out there. They're not just for Air Force One, they're for you too. Every air traffic control center from DC to LA has been notified that Flight 447 is under special escort. You're flying with the same protection we give the President. Rebecca was speechless. Captain Rodriguez, the general continued, and the commercial pilot straightened slightly at hearing his name. You have one of America's finest pilots sitting in your economy section. Captain Rebecca Chen, call sign Viper. 12 years of service. 3 combat deployments. Silver Star recipient. And the pilot, who, just 3 weeks ago, performed a rescue mission that will go down in Air Force history as one of the most skilled pieces of flying ever recorded. Captain Rodriguez stared at Rebecca with newfound respect. I had no idea, ma'am. Most people don't, the general said. Captain Chen prefers to keep a low profile, but today, we're making an exception. Viper, I need you to do something for me. Anything, ma'am? I need you to go back to your seat, and I need you to let the passengers on that plane know who's sitting among them. Can you do that? Rebecca felt her stomach drop. Ma'am, I'm not comfortable with. That's an order, Captain. Not a request. Yes, ma'am. Good. The captain will make an announcement momentarily. Blue skies. Viper. The line clicked off. Rebecca removed the headset. Her hands slightly shaking. Got. Captain Rodriguez was looking at her with something approaching. Oh, Captain Chen, it would be my honor if you'd remain here for the announcement. You can watch the formation from the flight deck. Thank you, sir, but I should get back to my seat. Of course. And Captain, thank you for your service. Rebecca nodded and headed back into the cabin, aware of every eye following her progress down the aisle. When she reached row 22, Brandon reluctantly stood to let her back into her middle seat. What was that about? He demanded. Before Rebecca could answer, Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the intercom again. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez again. I have some extraordinary news to share with you. The honor escort we're receiving today is being provided for one of our Pedeza hero who's been flying under the radar. If you'll pardon the aviation pun, passengers laughed nervously, looking around to try to identify who he was talking about. In seat 2C, sitting in economy class, just like the rest of us, is Captain Rebecca Chen of the United States Air Force. Captain Chen's call sign is Viper. Earned through 12 years of exceptional service, she's a fighter pilot who's flown some of the most advanced aircraft in our military arsenal, including the F-22 Raptor, like the ones you see outside our windows right now. Brandon's head whipped toward Rebecca so fast she thought he might get whiplash. His mouth fell open. Captain Chen is a Silver Star recipient, which is awarded for valor in combat. She's flown 3 combat deployments and, just 3 weeks ago, completed a classified rescue mission that saved American lives under conditions that most pilots wouldn't have attempted. The military personnel out there today aren't just escorting Air Force One. They're escorting Captain Chen, showing their respect and appreciation for her service. The cabin erupted. People unbuckled and stood, turning to look at row 22. A few passengers started clapping, and within seconds, the entire aircraft was applauding. Rebecca felt her face burning red. This was her nightmare, being the center of attention, being singled out, being treated differently. She'd spent her entire career trying to be just one of the team, just another pilot, earning respect through skill rather than publicity. But as she looked around at the face's genuine appreciation, Dho gratitude. She realized this wasn't about her discomfort. This was about what she represented. This was about people seeing what service looked like. Understanding that heroes weren't always visible or obvious. The flight attendant who'd been kind to her earlier approached with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "My son is in the army. Thank you for what you do." An elderly man from several rows back made his way forward. He was wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap. "Captain, I just wanted to shake your hand." Pilot to pilot, he extended his hand with visible emotion. "Welcome home from your mission." Rebecca shook his hand, her own eyes getting misty now. "Thank you, sir. It's an honor." More passengers approached a teacher who wanted to tell Rebecca she'd make sure her students heard about women in combat aviation. A father who wanted a photo of Rebecca with his daughter who dreamed of being a pilot. A businessman who pressed his business card into her hand and told her to call if she ever needed anything through it all. Brandon sat in shocked silence, his expensive laptop forgotten, his face cycling through expressions of disbelief, embarrassment, and something that might have been shame. The woman in 21D had turned fully around in her seat, her earlier condescension completely gone. I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "The things I said, I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't ask," Rebecca said gently. "You assumed. That's the lesson here. You never know who's sitting next to you on a plane." As the commotion gradually settled and passengers returned to their seats, Brandon finally found his voice. "You're a fighter pilot." It wasn't a question. More like he was trying to convince himself of an impossible fact. "Yes," Rebecca confirmed. "And that's Air Force One out there, and those are real fighter jets. Flying in formation. For you, for all of us, technically." "But yes." Brandon stared at his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet. "I said some really terrible things to you. About your job? About government work, being welfare, you did. I'm an idiot." Rebecca almost smiled. "You're not an idiot. You just made assumptions based on limited information. It happens." "I do it all the time," Brandon admitted. "Judge people based on appearances, on where they're sitting, on what they're wearing. I've always thought I was better than everyone else, because I make money, and fly business class, and close deals." He gestured at the fighter jets visible through the window. "But those pilots out there, they're actually important. They're actually doing something that matters. And I've spent my whole life thinking my venture capital deals were the height of achievement." The startup guy across the aisle leaned over. "Dude, I feel the exact same way. I've been bragging about my funding round for 2 hours, and you literally save lives. I'm so embarrassed." The woman in 21D wiped her eyes. "I told you that you'd never worked hard enough to afford business class. You'd probably fly military transport most of the time, don't you?" "Actually, I've logged about 4,000 hours in military aircraft," Rebecca said, "and most of that is in jets that cost $90 million each. When I fly commercially, the ticket price doesn't really factor into my thinking." Brandon laughed, a bitter sound. "Of course, it doesn't. You're operating on a completely different level than the rest of us, and we were treating you like you were beneath us because you weren't drinking gin and tonics and working on PowerPoint presentations. My PowerPoint presentation seems really stupid." "Now," the startup guy admitted. The elderly veteran from Vietnam made his way back to Rebecca's row. He'd been watching this exchange with approval. "Young man," he said to Brandon, "what you're feeling right now, that's called humility. It's good for the soul. This young lady could have told you who she was at any time. She could have shut you down with a few words. But she didn't, because real heroes don't need to prove themselves to anyone." Brandon nodded, properly chastened. The veteran continued, "I flew helicopters in Vietnam, spent a year getting shot at daily. When I came home, people spit on me in airports, called me a baby killer. Took decades before anyone thanked me for my service. But this young lady right here? She represents a new generation. Women flying combat missions, earning their place through skill and courage, not quotas or politics. And she's doing it while people like you dismiss her as just another economy passenger." "Sir, I understand, Brandon said. And I'm truly sorry. To both of you, the veteran smiled. Apology accepted. Just remember this feeling next time you're tempted to judge someone. The pilot's voice came over the intercom one more time. Ladies and gentlemen, our honor escort will be with us for another 30 minutes before they need to return to their respective bases. If you'd like to take photos or videos, please feel free to do so. This is truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience for everyone aboard. The cabin became a flurry of phones and cameras. Passengers on the left side took turns with those on the right side. Everyone wanting documentation of this extraordinary moment that the teenage girl who'd been recording earlier approached Rebecca. Captain, Chun. Would it be okay if I took a video with you? I want to show my ROTC instructor. I'm planning to apply to the Air Force Academy next year. Rebecca's expression softened completely. Of course, and if you want to talk about the Academy or aviation, I'm happy to answer any questions. Really? That would be amazing. They recorded a brief video together, Rebecca offering encouragement and advice to the aspiring cadet. When they finished, the girl was practically glowing with excitement. I can't believe I got to meet a real fighter pilot. This is the best flight ever. As the girl returned to her seat, Rebecca noticed that Brandon was watching with a strange expression on his face. What? She asked. I have a daughter, he said quietly. She's 12. She wants to be a pilot when she grows up. I've been discouraging her, telling her it's too hard, that she should focus on more practical careers. But watching you with that girl just now, he paused. I'm going to call my daughter when we land and tell her she can be anything she wants to be. That's good, Rebecca said. The world needs more pilots. Especially women pilots. It's changing, but there's still work to do. The woman in 21D turned around again. Can I ask you something? That classified mission they mentioned, the one where you saved 6 lives, can you tell us anything about it? No, ma'am. When they say classified, they mean classified. I couldn't share details even if I wanted to. I understand. But can you tell us what it's like? Flying a fighter jet. What does that feel like? Rebecca considered the question. Imagine having complete freedom in 3 dimensions. Most people live their whole lives bound by gravity, stuck on a 2-dimensional plane. But when you're in a fighter jet, you can go anywhere up, down, inverted, vertical. You're not just traveling through space, you're dancing with physics. The GI forces, the speed, the precision required's like nothing else in the world. Doesn't it scare you? The woman asked. Every single time, Rebecca admitted, fear is healthy. It keeps you sharp. The day I stop being scared is the day I should stop flying. Brandon had been listening intently. Can I ask you something? When we were talking earlier, saying all those things about government workers and people in economy class, did you want to tell us who you were? Rebecca shook her head. Not really. I don't fly for recognition. I fly because it's what I'm good at and because the mission matters. What people think of me personally isn't important. But we were so disrespectful. And normally, I would have just ignored it and forgotten about it by the time we landed. People make assumptions all the time. I can't control what others think. Then why is this happening? Brandon gestured at the escort formation outside. If you don't care about recognition, why did your command arrange all this? Rebecca smiled slightly. I don't think this was just for me. I think this was a teaching moment. My general knew I was on this flight. She knew Air Force One was in the area. And she probably figured that showing a couple hundred civilians what real service looks like might be valuable. She was right. The startup guy spoke up. So we were basically set up to learn a lesson about not judging people. Maybe. Or maybe the military just wanted to honor one of their own, and the lesson was a bonus. Either way, you've learned something today, haven't you? Absolutely, he said emphatically. I'm never going to look at someone the same way again. As Flight 447 continued west, approaching the California coastline, the fighter jets began their departure sequence. One by one, they peeled off from formation first, the 2 F-35s. Waggling their wings in the traditional aviator salute before climbing rapidly and banking away. Then the two F-22s, performing a more elaborate departure with a synchronized barrel roll before disappearing into the distance. Air Force One remained in formation for a few minutes longer. Through the cockpit radio, Captain Rodriguez received a final transmission that he played over the cabin speakers. Flight 447. This is Air Force One. It has been our honor to fly with Captain Chen today. To all aboard, thank you for sharing your flight with one of America's finest. Blue skies and tailwinds. Air Force One out. The cabin erupted in applause again, as Air Force One climbed to its original altitude and continued toward its destination. The commercial flight felt suddenly ordinary, just another 737, cruising at 35,000 feet. But the atmosphere in the cabin had completely changed. Passengers were talking animatedly about what they'd witnessed. Photos and videos were being shared. Social media posts were going viral in real time, as passengers with Wi-Fi uploaded their documentation of this extraordinary flight. Rebecca's phone was buzzing, constantly with notifications. But she'd turned it face down, overwhelmed by the attention. She just wanted to get to Los Angeles, see her father, and return to some semblance of normalcy. The flight attendant approached with a smile. Captain Chen, the captain would like to know if you'd be willing to come forward during landing. You're welcome to observe from the jump seat in the cockpit. That's very kind, but I should stay in my assigned seat. He insisted I ask. He said it would be an honor. Rebecca glanced at Brandon, who immediately nodded. Go, seriously, you should absolutely go. Are you sure? I'll guard your backpack with my life, he said with a small smile. Consider it the least I can do. Rebecca made her way forward one more time, this time to a cabin full of supportive smiles and thank you. A child high-fived her as she passed. A businessman stood and shook her hand. The teenage aspiring cadet gave her a salute, which Rebecca returned with military precision. In the cockpit, Captain Rodriguez and his co-pilot made room for her on the jump seat between them. Thank you for this, Captain Rodriguez. Please, call me Miguel. And thank you for letting us be part of your honor escort. In 25 years of commercial flying, I've never experienced anything like that. As they began their descent into Los Angeles, Rebecca watched the familiar approach patterns the sprawl of the city. The mountains, the Pacific Ocean glittering in the late afternoon sun. She'd seen this view hundreds of times, but never from the cockpit of a commercial jet. Captain Chen, the co-pilot, said, "Can I ask you something? What's it like transitioning from military jets to commercial flights as a passenger? Does it drive you crazy not being in control?" Rebecca laughed. You know, it's actually kind of nice. When I'm a passenger, I can just trust that the pilots know what they're doing. I don't have to think about the systems, the weather, the mission objectives. I can just, relax. Even in economy middle seats, Miguel asked with a grin. Okay, maybe relax is a strong word for middle seats. They all laughed as they descended through 10,000 feet. Miguel keyed the radio. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our final approach into Los Angeles. We'll be on the ground in about 15 minutes. I want to thank you all for being part of something special today. Captain Chen, would you like to say anything to the passengers? Rebecca hesitated, then took the offered microphone. Hi everyone. I just want to say thank you for your kind words and support. What happened today, Escorted? The ceremony that's not really about me. It's about recognizing all the people who serve, often invisibly, often without recognition. The next time you're on a flight, or in a store, or anywhere really, remember that you never know who's around you. That quiet person in the middle seat might be a hero. That older person at the grocery store might be a veteran. That young person serving your coffee might be working 3 jobs to support their family. We're all just people trying to do our best. So maybe judge less and appreciate more. Thank you. The cabin erupted in applause one final time. The landing was smooth and professional. As the aircraft taxied to the gate, Rebecca could see something unusual through the cockpit windows. Fire trucks were positioned along the taxiway, their crews standing at attention. What's that about? She asked. Miguel smiled. Water salute. It's traditionally done for a pilot's final flight before retirement. but sometimes we do it for special occasions. The airport was notified about your honor escort. They wanted to participate. As Flight 447 passed between the two fire trucks, they activated their water cannons, creating an arc of water over the aircraft, a ceremonial salute that made Rebecca's eyes water with emotion. When the plane finally reached the gate and the seatbelt sign turned off, passengers stood and gave Rebecca a standing ovation. She felt overwhelmed, humbled, and deeply uncomfortable with the attention. But she managed a small wave of acknowledgement. Brandon was waiting at her row, holding her backpack. "Captain Chen, I want you to have this." He pressed his business card into her hand. "My firm invests in startups, but we also have a foundation that supports veteran causes. I'd like to make a significant donation in your name. And if you ever need anything, job opportunities, connections, anything, please don't hesitate to call." "That's not necessary," Rebecca started to say. "It absolutely is necessary. I need to do something meaningful with my privilege and my money. You've shown me that. Please, let me help." Rebecca took the card. "Thank you. That's very generous." The woman from 21D approached next. "Captain, I work in real estate, and I have connections with several veteran housing organizations. I'd like to volunteer my time and expertise. Would that be okay?" "That would be wonderful. Thank you." The startup guy was next. "So, I know my Milkit AI thing is pretty insignificant compared to what you do, but I'm going to pivot. I want to create technology that helps veterans. Would you be willing to consult? I'll pay whatever rate you think is fair. I'd be happy to consult, but you don't need to pay me. If you're genuinely trying to help veterans, that's payment enough." One by one, passengers stopped to thank her, to apologize for earlier judgments, to share how the experience had changed their perspective. The elderly veteran gave her another firm handshake. The teenage cadet asked for one more photo. The kind flight attendant hugged her and thanked her for inspiring everyone. As Rebecca finally made her way off the aircraft, she was met by an airport official and two security guards. "Captain Chen, we have a car waiting to take you to your final destination. And there's a small delegation from the local Air Force Auxiliary Squadron who'd like to greet you, if you're willing." Rebecca sighed internally, but smiled outwardly. So much for a quiet homecoming. But as she walked through the terminal, something unexpected happened. Other travelers who'd seen the social media posts recognized her. They stopped what they were doing to applaud. A veteran in a wheelchair saluted her. A mother lifted her young daughter to see the hero pilot. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what she represented: service, sacrifice, capability, courage. People needed heroes they could see and relate to, and if being visible for a few hours could inspire others or change perceptions, then maybe it was worth the discomfort. Outside the terminal, a small group of Air Force Auxiliary members stood in dress uniform, holding a banner that read, "Thank you, Captain Chen." They saluted as she approached, and she returned the salute sharply. The delegation commander, a retired colonel, stepped forward. "Captain Chen, on behalf of the Air Force community in Los Angeles, we wanted to express our gratitude for your service and congratulate you on today's honor. We also understand you're here on personal time to visit your father. Please know that if you or your family need anything during your leave, we're here to help. Thank you, sir. That means a great deal. And one more thing." He gestured to a car parked at the curb. "We've arranged transportation to take you wherever you need to go. No strings attached, just fellow Air Force supporting one of our own." Rebecca felt tears threatening again. "Thank you, truly." The drive to her father's house took 45 minutes through LA traffic. Rebecca sat in the back seat, finally able to check her phone without interruption. Hundreds of notifications. The videos and photos from Flight 447 had gone viral. Hashtag Captain Chen was trending. News outlets were picking up the story. Her squadron mates were sending congratulatory messages, mixed with merciless teasing about becoming a celebrity. But the message that caught her attention was from her father. "Saw the videos online. Very proud of you, sweetheart. But I was already proud before the escorts and the attention. I'm proud of who you are, not just what you do. Can't wait to see you. Love, Dad. Rebecca smiled through tears. That's what really mattered. Not the escorts, not the viral videos, not the standing ovations. Just being a good person, doing meaningful work, and being there for the people she loved. When she arrived at her father's modest house in the suburbs, he was waiting on the porch, 72 years old, thinner than she remembered. But smiling broadly, Rebecca dropped her backpack and ran to him, hugging him carefully. He felt fragile in her arms, but his grip was still strong. My daughter, the celebrity, he teased. Dad, please don't. I'm kidding. Come inside. I made your favorite dinner. Well, I tried. The chemo affects my sense of taste, so it might be terrible. They went inside together, and for the next few hours, Rebecca wasn't Captain Chen or Viper or the hero pilot from Flight 447. She was just Rebecca. Having dinner with her dad, talking about his treatment, sharing stories, being present. Later that night, as her father slept, and she sat on the back porch, looking at the stars, Rebecca reflected on the day's events. She thought about Brandon and his transformation from arrogant businessman to humbled supporter. She thought about the teenage cadet who now had a role model. She thought about the passengers who'd learned not to judge by appearances. Most importantly, she thought about what the general had said about this being a teaching moment. Maybe that was the real mission all along, not the combat operations or the classified rescues, but the simple act of showing people that service comes in unexpected packages. That heroes don't always announce themselves. That the person you dismiss might be extraordinary. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from General Morrison. Viper, the president saw the videos. He wants you to know that your service is appreciated at the highest levels. But between you and me, I think the real impact was on those passengers. You changed perspectives today? That's a different kind of mission success. Proud of you. Now, go be with your father. That's an order. GM Rebecca smiled and pocketed her phone. Tomorrow she could deal with the media requests and the attention. Tomorrow she could think about returning to duty and the next mission. Tomorrow she could process what this all meant for her career and public profile. Tonight, she was just going to be grateful for her father's health improving, for the chance to serve her country, for the unexpected honor of the escort, and for the reminder that even the smallest interactions can have profound impact. She looked up at the stars, imagining the fighter jets that had escorted her, now returned to their bases. Somewhere up there, other pilots were flying other missions, protecting other people, serving quietly and without recognition. That was the real story, not the viral videos or the standing ovations, but the daily commitment to service that thousands of military personnel made without fanfare or acknowledgement. And if her moment in the spotlight helped people understand and appreciate that reality, then maybe being uncomfortable for a few hours was worth it. Rebecca went inside, checked on her father one more time, and finally allowed herself to sleep content in knowing that she'd done her duty, both in the cockpit and in the cabin of Flight 447.